You don't sleep because too much of you is still awake. You don't sleep because the world you're in never goes dark. And you don't sleep because sleep, in its true form, has been systematically dismantled and replaced with something that only pretends to restore you. You believe that sleep is a nightly ritual, a natural pause, a predictable reboot. But sleep has become something else, a simulation, thinly draped over a consciousness that refuses to vanish. You go through the motions, dim the lights, brush your teeth, lower your voice, check your phone one last time. But nothing inside you actually slows down, because sleep, in its biological essence, is not a choice. It is a surrender, a chemical cascade, a neurological off switch, a vulnerability you no longer grant yourself. Your body may lie horizontal, your eyes may close, but your systems remain half lit. Consciousness is not gone. It is hovering above the bed like a drone watching itself. And you've learned to accept this, to call it normal. You wake up 6 times a night. You scroll at 2:00 a.m. You replay yesterday's arguments. You whisper mantras to yourself about breathing and presence and stillness, all while your brain churns beneath them, manufacturing noise beneath silence. You don't sleep. You act out the ritual of sleep inside a body that no longer knows what sleep is, because something changed. Not suddenly, but incrementally, through habits, through light, through overstimulation, through the erosion of natural rhythms. And you participated. You trained your body out of sleep. You taught it that night is just another version of day, that light never ends, that rest is negotiable. You mistake exhaustion for readiness. You think being tired means your body wants to shut down. But fatigue isn't sleepiness. It's friction. It's the body screaming, "Slow down," while the brain keeps whispering, "Not yet." And even if you could sleep, if you could collapse into unconsciousness, would it be sleep or just temporary absence? Does sleep without depth count? Do dreams matter if you don't remember them? Does healing happen if the process has been surgically stripped of its stages? You have confused not being awake with being asleep, and the system lets you. The system calls this rest. But what if you've only ever learned to perform sleep? What if real sleep is something your nervous system unlearned long ago? Night, as you experience it, is not darkness. It's design. A human invention layered over the natural absence of light. Before street lamps, before electric grids, before pixels and screens, the night was not yours. It belonged to other forces, cold, animal, unknowable. Sleep, then, was a surrender not to routine, but to the void. Now you shape the night to your liking. You bring the sun inside, wire it into your walls, hold it in your hand. You scatter bulbs across ceilings, across time zones, across continents. You build towers that never dim. You live in cities that never blink. The rhythm that once dictated sleep, the rise and fall of solar certainty, is gone. And in its place, you've constructed a false circadian reality. Your body is confused. Your pineal gland still waits for true darkness to begin releasing melatonin, but your screens lie. Your overhead light lies. Your bedtime YouTube loop lies. And your brain, that ancient animal built for cave and dusk, listens to the lie because it's louder than the original signal. Light, to your biology, is not decoration. It is command. Blue wavelengths slam into your retinal ganglion cells and tell your suprachiasmatic nucleus, wake up. Cortisol stays high. Melatonin stays low. The hormonal gates do not open. Sleep does not come. You think of the night as a container for rest. But now it's just extended exposure to data, to noise, to comparison, to fear. You lie in bed, absorbing the collective stress of a global feed, mistaking this assault for relaxation. You're scrolling inside the system that made sleep optional, and you expect the body to obey an outdated outdated script. But what if night no longer signals anything at all? What if it's just more time? Sleep is not a moral act. It's not a reward. It's not self-care. It is a physiological demand in a system that no longer respects rhythm. And so the body adapts poorly. You fall asleep hours late. You wake up in fog. You call it insomnia. You call it stress. But the problem is simpler. Your environment is lying to your biology, and your biology is listening. What if your insomnia isn't a malfunction, but a correct response to a world that never goes dark? You are ruled by clocks, digital, analog, internal, but none of them truly align. You were born into a rhythm older than civilization, a biological pattern encoded in light and temperature, food and silence, predator and shelter. And then you were handed a new one, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Deadlines, alarms, time zones, meetings across hemispheres. One rhythm is evolutionary. The other is economic. Your circadian rhythm, the body's natural 24.2-hour clock, doesn't care what time it says on your phone. It doesn't shift when your job demands it. It doesn't advance just because your schedule says you need to be asleep by 10. Your internal timekeeper is located deep within your brain, in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which tracks light, not logic. But light no longer reflects truth. It reflects output, fluorescence, industrial necessity. You eat breakfast in darkness and answer emails in blue-lit silence at midnight. You burn artificial daylight into your retinas as melatonin tries to rise. You jet lag yourself without leaving your home. This is not insomnia. It's circadian misalignment, a war between clocks. The body wants one thing. The system demands another. And in the friction between those, you lie awake. Studies show that even minor shifts, a single hour, can fracture sleep. Daylight, saving time, leads to measurable spikes in heart attacks, car crashes, and depressive episodes. What does that tell you? That an hour, just 1 hour, can be fatal. And you're shifting your internal hourglass every night with screen time, work, light, caffeine revenge. You call it staying up late. You think you're in control, but your nervous system doesn't believe you. It waits for cues that no longer come. Sunlight in the morning, darkness at night, consistent meals, consistent motion. Instead, it gets erratic signals, incomplete cycles, false light. So it fragments. Your cortisol rises when it should fall. Your temperature drops at the wrong hour. Your hormones fire out of sync. And sleep is no longer a phase. It's a glitch. You think your alarm wakes you up, but maybe you were never truly asleep. Maybe the clock in your body is ticking to a rhythm you no longer live by. And maybe that's why you always feel 1 beat behind, even after 8 hours in bed. What happens when every clock around you lies louder than the one inside you? Sleep is not just rest, it's disappearance, a letting go of awareness, of vigilance, of control. And for many, that surrender feels too much like dying. So you resist, not with panic, but with something quieter. Distraction, delay, delay, delay. Because what waits in silence isn't peace. It's thought, memory, self. You lie down, and the world goes quiet. And suddenly, everything you've avoided all day climbs to the surface. There's no noise to drown it, no task to blur it. Just you and the backlog of unresolved thoughts, grief, shame, unfinished tasks, spirals of what-ifs, parallel lives you could have lived. You call it overthinking, but that's not what it is. It's decompression without relief. The pressure doesn't release, it expands. And here's the paradox. Sleep requires safety. But the moment the lights go out, the brain scans for danger. Not lions in the grass, but inner threats, regret, memory, self-judgment. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes more active during REM sleep, not less. The body doesn't forget its traumas in the night. It rehearses them. You wake from a dream of falling, or burning, or speaking aloud what you'd never dare say. And your heart pounds, even if you don't remember why. The fear isn't just in nightmares. It's in the act of losing awareness, of floating beyond control, of being nowhere and no one for several hours. Some people stay awake, not because they can't sleep, but because they won't. Not consciously, but biologically. They scroll, they snack, they reorganize shelves. They unwind for 5 hours. What they're really doing is avoiding the void, avoiding the confrontation with the self that happens in darkness. Sleep requires trust. Trust that the world will still be there, that you won't miss something, that you won't be harmed, that you're allowed to go unconscious. But if your life is filled with unfinished danger, emotional, psychological, existential, how could your nervous system possibly believe it's safe to vanish? You tell yourself you're just a night owl, that your brain is too busy. But what if the problem isn't busyness at all? What if you're afraid of what the silence might say when there's nothing left to distract you? Even when you sleep, it doesn't work. You wake up more tired than before. You sleep 8 hours and feel like you haven't slept at all. You begin to suspect something is wrong. But what exactly? Because sleep is not a block of unconsciousness. It is a structure, stages, cycles, delicate sequences of neurochemical transitions. Light sleep into deep sleep, into REM, repeated every 90 minutes like a spiral downward and back. And when that structure breaks, when the brain is pulled prematurely from one phase or fails to reach another, what you get isn't sleep. It's something that looks like sleep from the outside, but doesn't do the job. This is sleep fragmentation, and it is invisible to you. You don't remember waking up 10 times a night for 3 seconds each. You don't notice that you never reach slow wave sleep. But your brain notices, your body notices, your immune system, your mood, your cognition, they all notice. And what breaks it? Everything. Light at the wrong time, noise, stress hormones, pain, subtle breathing disruptions you're unaware of. Your body jerks slightly. Your airway narrows for a moment. Your brain registers a threat, pulls you up from deep sleep into awareness, but not full wakefulness. You roll over, forget, drift again. But the cycle has been interrupted. You've been reset. The next descent into deep sleep is harder. Your REM is delayed or compressed. The memory consolidation, emotional processing, metabolic repair, all the functions meant to happen in those deeper layers are shortchanged. Night after night, you assume sleep is duration, but it is depth. And if you never descend, you never restore. And so begins the slow erosion. Attention span phrase, reaction times dull. Your ability to regulate emotion collapses. You become irritable, forgetful, numb. You start to feel like someone else, and you wonder why. You're not tired from lack of sleep. You're tired from fake sleep, from nights that never completed their sequence, from being dragged into consciousness again and again by a system trying to protect you from threats that may not even exist anymore. But the system doesn't care what's real, only what feels real. So the sleep breaks quietly, night by night. What if you're not sleep deprived, just trapped in a version of sleep that never lets you come back whole? You imagine noise as external, sirens, traffic, conversations through thin walls. And yes, these intrude. But the worst noise is the one you don't hear, the one inside the nervous system, the hum that never stops. You try to sleep, but beneath your skin is a constant signal. Be ready. This is not your imagination. It's your autonomic nervous system toggling between sympathetic arousal and parasympathetic recovery. But in your case, the toggle is stuck. Your sympathetic system, the one designed for threat response, is still humming after the lights go out. It pumps cortisol through your bloodstream, keeps your heart slightly elevated, your pupils subtly dilated, your breath shallow, ready for nothing. Because the threat isn't clear. It's ambient. Deadlines, social pressure, financial tension, notification anxiety, emotional backlog, political fear. The threat is life itself, or rather, the version of life you've constructed, which feeds the body an unending loop of micro-emergencies. So the noise stays on. The auditory cortex is only part of the equation. The real intrusions happen below awareness. Hypothalamic activation, amygdala vigilance, HPA axis feedback loops. They're not making sound, but they're not letting go either. You may hear silence, but your nervous system is still listening, still watching, still calculating. And then there's the noise of thought, mental simulations, rehearsals, replays, arguments never spoken, futures never lived. Your prefrontal cortex tries to quiet them, but it can't. The loops don't respond to logic. They respond to perceived incompleteness. The unfinished always returns. You try white noise. You try breath work. You try ASMR, hoping someone else's whisper can overwrite your own. But none of these touch the origin of the noise, because the origin is you. And what if your system no longer believes in silence? What if, over years, your body has learned that silence means vulnerability, means exposure, means time to think, and that thinking, for you, is danger? So the body keeps humming just beneath the threshold, just enough to prevent full descent. And no one sees it, because you look fine, you function, You speak. You work. You cope. But inside, the static never stops. How can you ever sleep when your own body mistakes peace for a threat? You think of your body as a tool, something to quiet, to stretch, medicate, numb, or sedate. But your body is not passive. It remembers. It resists. And when you lie down at night, the thing that keeps you awake may not be your thoughts, but your muscles, your joints, your organs, holding tension they never learned to release. You don't notice it during the day. You override it with momentum, caffeine, to-do lists. But when everything else stops, what's left is a body still gripped, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, gut in defense, a posture your conscious mind didn't choose, but that your nervous system adopted as baseline. This is not hypothetical. Chronic tension, somatic holding, is well documented in trauma research, chronic pain studies, and psychophysiology. The body encodes stress in fascia, in muscle tone, in the constant low-level firing of protective motor pathways. And the body is not stupid. It only holds what it was taught to hold. The problem is, you try to sleep without unwinding that grip. You stretch, maybe. You breathe, if you remember. But mostly, you just drop into bed, expecting the body to follow. It doesn't. It stays vigilant. It stays prepared. Because somewhere along the line, it learned that letting go means risk. For some, it's an injury. For others, years of walking on edge. For many, it's nothing dramatic, just never quite feeling safe. And so the body remains half-armed, half-defended, even in a warm room, even on soft sheets, even after the lights go out. And sleep, real sleep, requires total muscular surrender, parasympathetic dominance, diaphragmatic breathing, a fall into vulnerability. And if your body doesn't get the signal that it's allowed to collapse, if the grip remains in the hips, the neck, the fists, then you won't fall. You'll hover, you'll drift in shallow waves, never deep, never whole. And the worst part, you won't know. You'll call it light sleeping. You'll say you're just not a good sleeper. But it's your body that's still holding the trauma, still bracing against something your mind may have forgotten. So you lie down, but you don't let go. What if your body isn't failing to sleep, but refusing to? You think sleep is made of hours, of length, of duration, but sleep is made of depth. And the deepest parts are where dreaming lives. You no longer dream. Or, more accurately, you no longer remember dreaming. Your REM cycles are shortened, interrupted, stripped of meaning by a body that never makes it past the surface. And so you drift. Light sleep, interrupted sleep, synthetic sleep, but not restorative sleep, not the kind that cleans the psyche, not the kind that puts the self back together. Because dreaming is not decoration. It is neurological process. It is memory. It is emotional detox. It is the cognitive recalibration of the self. And when you do not dream, or do not dream fully, your brain does not finish what the day began. Grief lingers, recycles, identity warps. In REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex quiets while the limbic system, the seat of emotion, activates. This is not noise. This is integration. This is the system resolving the unresolved. It does not do this politely. Dreams are not designed to comfort you. They are designed to digest you, to take the pieces of self that fractured during waking hours and put them through symbolic fire. When REM is disrupted by alcohol, by late-night light exposure, by fragmented sleep, by unprocessed trauma, the process stalls. The dreams become erratic or disappear. You wake unrestored, still carrying what the night was supposed to burn. You don't notice at first, but over time, the unprocessed accumulates. Memory fog, emotional reactivity, poor impulse control, a flattening of experience. Because the dream didn't come, because the thing your body was supposed to do, the ritual descent into story, into symbolic meaning, never occurred. Your mind is starving for narrative, and you feed it dopamine instead, scrolling instead, content, stimulation. But none of it replaces the hallucinatory therapy of dreams. You think dreams are fantasy, but your brain evolved them. Every mammal dreams, all the way down to the mouse. Why? Because something essential happens there, and you are losing it. So you close your eyes. You sleep, technically, but nothing is resolved. The debris remains, and you wonder why the weight never lifts. What happens when the self you're supposed to meet in dreams stops showing up? You eat, you snack, you hydrate. You treat your body like a fuel tank, a system of inputs and outputs. But the timing is wrong. The cues are reversed. And by the time you try to sleep, you've already confused the entire metabolic orchestra that once kept sleep tied to nourishment. Because digestion and sleep are not separate. They are intimately linked. Sleep is metabolically regulated. Insulin, ghrelin, leptin, glucose levels, gut microbiota, they all feed back into the sleep-wake cycle. And when the rhythms are broken, so is rest. You eat late, you eat fast, you eat more when you're tired, thinking you're feeding energy, but you're feeding confusion. Night eating, conscious or not, sends contradictory signals. Stay awake, digest, keep going. The gut lights up. The liver starts its shift. And your brain, which wanted to wind down, is forced to stay active, coordinating a system that's still processing, not restoring. This is not your fault. You're following appetite. But appetite itself becomes dysregulated when sleep is broken. Sleep deprivation raises ghrelin, hunger hormone, and lowers leptin, satiety hormone. You crave carbs, fats, sugar, quick dopamine. And these choices feed the cycle. Not just because of weight gain or sluggishness, but because they reinforce metabolic disorder. insulin resistance, inflammation, blood sugar crashes at 3 a.m. that wake you in the dark with no idea why. Even water, the thing you're told to drink more of, can betray you. Hydrate too close to bed, and your sleep fractures into bathroom visits. Don't hydrate, and your sleep breaks with thirst. The balance is razor thin, and no one teaches you how to find it. Then there's alcohol, the false sedative. You drink to wind down, and it works for a few hours. But alcohol fragments, induces rebound wakefulness, and increases night sweats and shallow breathing. You fall asleep easier and wake up broken. You call it a bad night. It was a poisoned night. Your body tries to obey. It processes what you give it. But if the signals are mistimed, meals at midnight, snacks in bed, sugar spikes before lying flat, your entire circadian system is disrupted. Because your gut has its own clock, and that clock talks to your brain. What if you've been feeding yourself comfort and feeding your insomnia at the same time? You do not enter the night empty. You carry content, an endless stream of other people's faces, voices, opinions, disasters, pleasures, victories, and losses. Your mind is full. Not with memory, not with clarity, but with noise that wasn't yours an hour ago. You scroll, you absorb, you click, you laugh, and flint, and seethe, and compare. You expose yourself to more data in a day than previous generations absorbed in a year. You call it entertainment. You call it connection. But your nervous system doesn't care what you call it. It treats all of it as input, and it hasn't had time to process anything, because information is not neutral. Every post, every video, every message enters the cognitive emotional loop, activating dopamine, norepinephrine, even cortisol, depending on the emotional content. These chemicals don't stop at your eyes. They go to your body. They raise your heart rate, shift your breathing, alter your sense of self, and you bring this into bed. You lay your phone next to your pillow. You check it one more time. And instead of descent, you activate. Instead of slowing, you react. Even the anticipation of a message triggers arousal. Even a silent phone lights up your brain's vigilance network, telling your thalamus to stay alert, just in case. And so you lie down, full of everyone else's lives, their joys, their rage, their curated suffering. You have not digested any of it. You've simply ingested it. And now you expect sleep to arrive. It doesn't, because your attentional system is still open. Your limbic system is still responding. Your prefrontal cortex, instead of unwinding, is tangled in unresolved narratives, unanswered emails, imaginary arguments. The brain cannot transition from content consumption to deep sleep in the span of 5 minutes. But you've trained it to try. And in doing so, you've taught your body that the bed is not a place for rest. It is a portal, a threshold between your mind and an infinite stream of stimulation. You have merged the ritual of sleep with the ritual of scrolling, and now they are indistinguishable. So sleep avoids you, not because you're broken, because your mind is too full of things that have nowhere to go. What if the very things you consume for relief are what have made your peace impossible? Sleep doesn't require action. It requires surrender. But you don't know how to stop preparing. Even in bed, you are scanning ahead. What time is it? How many hours are left? What happens if you don't fall asleep now? You calculate the consequences before they happen. You panic before they arrive. This is anticipatory anxiety, and it doesn't sleep. It loops. You lie in bed and check the time. You wake at 2:37 a.m. and calculate what you'll lose if you can't get back to sleep by 3. You think this will help, that maybe watching the clock will push your body into submission. But the opposite happens. Time becomes threat. Awareness becomes alarm. you've made the act of not sleeping into something your nervous system now associates with danger. This isn't metaphor. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, activates in response to anticipated negative outcomes. And when that outcome is, I won't sleep, and tomorrow I'll fall apart, the amygdala responds the same way it would to a physical predator. Cortisol spikes, heart rate rises, and the very act of trying to sleep keeps you awake. Sleep cannot be forced. It cannot be chased. It can only be allowed. But you've turned sleep into a performance metric. You track it. You measure it. You compete with yourself to optimize it. And in doing so, you've made rest something to achieve, something that can be failed. The paradox is absolute. The more you care about sleep, the harder it becomes to reach. You buy blackout curtains. You track REM on an app. You avoid caffeine. You do everything right, and still you lie awake, because what you're really doing is monitoring yourself, treating your own nervous system like a project. But your nervous system does not respond to logic. It responds to safety. It responds to rhythm, to patterns. And when the pattern becomes watch yourself, worry, calculate, repeat, then sleep itself becomes an object of fear. You don't need better sleep hygiene. You need a different relationship with time, with control, with the idea that rest is something you can bargain with. Because once your bed becomes a battlefield, your body will never feel safe in it again. What if the only thing keeping you awake is your belief that you're running out of time? You believe your body wants what's good for you, that it seeks rest, healing, balance. But your body doesn't want peace. It wants predictability. And if chaos has been your rhythm, late nights, stress, guilt, artificial light, fear, then chaos is what your body has learned to trust. This is not poetic. This is neuroplasticity. the brain rewires itself based on repetition. If your system receives stress at midnight, stimulation at 2 a.m., and adrenaline at dawn, it learns to prepare for those events. It doesn't wait for rest. It anticipates disruption. It primes for it. You taught your body this pattern, not through choice, but through repetition. You taught it that night is when you're most active, that the bed is where you worry, that sleep is unreliable, fleeting, and undeserved. And so your autonomic nervous system adapted, not to serve health, but to serve pattern recognition. That's what it's built for, to survive patterns, not to question them. So now, even when you're safe, even when it's quiet, even when you've done everything right, your body remembers the old cues. Your heart rate rises when you lie down. Your breath shortens. Your gut churns. You are not under threat. But your system can't tell the difference, because it doesn't need reality. It needs consistency. And here's the worst part. Your body is efficient. It adapts quickly, but it unlearns slowly. It takes weeks, sometimes months, of safety for the nervous system to believe that the threat is gone. That night no longer means danger, that your bed is not a trigger, that the darkness isn't a rehearsal space for breakdown. Until then, your body betrays you, not maliciously, mechanically. It runs the program you installed, a program written in chronic tension, worry, and erratic rhythm. So when you ask, "Why won't my body let me sleep?" understand this. It is letting you survive the only way it knows how. It doesn't want rest. It wants control. It wants to preempt the chaos it expects. And in doing so, it becomes the very thing that keeps you from healing. What if your insomnia isn't the enemy, but the body trying to protect you from a version of night you taught it to fear? You try to sleep, but something ancient rises in you. Not a thought, not a dream, a felt sense, shame, dread, a tension you can't name. You shift under the blankets, not from discomfort, but from something deeper, a body memory, a ghost in the nervous system that was never buried. This is implicit memory, the kind that doesn't speak in words, the kind that lives in muscle tone, in heartbeat, in posture. You may not remember what happened. You may not need to. The body does. It reacts. And in the dark, when the distractions end, it activates. Trauma, big or small, dramatic or invisible, is stored not as story, but as physiological pattern. The tightening of the chest when you lie still, the urge to move, the need to fidget, to check, to recheck, to shift position, to open a light, to escape the silence. These are not quirks. They are survival responses to events your system never fully processed. And sleep is a threat to these patterns, because sleep is absence, and absence is dangerous when the body is still waiting for the next blow, the next scream, the next abandonment. Sleep means lowering defenses, and your defenses were built so early you don't even know they're up. The body doesn't need your permission. It scans for threat constantly, even imagined ones, even echoes. And if your sleep cycles have been hijacked by stored fear, then REM sleep becomes dysregulated. Dream content becomes distressing, or REM is skipped entirely. Your amygdala fires through the night, while your prefrontal cortex, the part that makes sense of it all, remains dim. You wake with dread. You don't know why. You carry it into the day. You medicate. You overwork. You scroll. But the dread doesn't leave, because the pattern was never broken, only suppressed. There is no sleep for the body that feels unsafe. And this safety is not built by thought. It's built by repetition, by slowness, by co-regulation. But the world doesn't give you those tools. It offers sedation instead, or discipline, or blame. And so the body holds it quietly, constantly, until night comes again. What if your inability to sleep is not dysfunction, but the purest evidence that something inside you has still not healed? You think of sleep as something you do, but increasingly it's something you perform for yourself. You go through the motions, dim the lights, stretch, breathe, silence the phone, and then you wait, not for sleep, but for confirmation that you're doing it right, that you're relaxed enough, that your mind is calm, that your body is ready. This is not rest. It is surveillance. You lie in bed and observe yourself, like a scientist studying an animal. You ask, "Am I falling asleep yet? Is this what sleepiness feels like? Was that a sleep twitch?" You shift position, not because you're uncomfortable, but to check what posture might work better. You adjust your pillow. You narrate your effort to stop narrating. And you don't realize that this is meta-consciousness, a recursive self-awareness that prevents the very surrender sleep requires. In psychology, it's called cognitive hypervigilance. Your prefrontal cortex, rather than disengaging, stays online, evaluating your own experience in real time. Monitoring for sleep is paradoxical. The observer must dissolve, but instead it sharpens. The watcher watches itself watch. You become two, the one trying to fall asleep and the one judging how well it's going. This fracture isn't new. It's been with you since childhood, since you first learned that how you felt was something that had to be managed, monitored, justified, hidden. You became your own observer, your own handler. And now, even in sleep, that watcher doesn't leave. Even technologies reinforce this split. Sleep trackers, wearables, data loops that tell you how many hours you got, what stages you entered, whether you, as if these numbers are reality, as if your rest is only valid when the graph approves. And so you enter the night as both subject and scientist, both patient and analyst, and sleep becomes a performance recorded for tomorrow's judgment. But sleep was never meant to be watched. It is an act of disappearance, of ego death, of being no one, nowhere, for a while. And yet, here you are, observing your own descent, holding the rope, refusing to let go. What if the reason you cannot sleep is because part of you is always awake, always watching, always reporting, always afraid of what might happen if it doesn't? Sleep used to be a language, a ritual your body understood without being told. The sky would darken, the light would fade, the temperature would fall. You would eat early, move slowly, grow quiet, lie down, and your body, recognizing the pattern, would respond. Not immediately, not perfectly, but consistently. The words made sense. But now the grammar is broken. You've replaced rhythm with randomness. Dusk no longer means anything. You eat late, then early, then skip meals altogether. You expose yourself to blue light at the exact time your circadian clock is designed to shift into melatonin production. You fill the hours before bed with input that would register as threat to any ancient system. Violent media, social comparison, panic scrolls. And yet, you expect your body to translate it all into rest. It can't. The signals are contradictory. The body doesn't understand what's being asked of it. It receives stimulation and sedation in the same breath. It's told to relax, but flooded with adrenaline. It's told to sleep, but surrounded by noise. And so it learns confusion. It learns that sleep is not reliable, not associated with any consistent pattern. This is not just about habits. It's about meaning. You've lost the semantic rhythm your biology once trusted. You no longer speak the cues of rest fluently. You speak disruption. Even the bed, your supposed sanctuary, has become ambiguous. Sometimes it's a workstation, sometimes a snack table, sometimes a movie theater, sometimes a place of conflict. Your body no longer associates the bed with surrender. It associates it with everything. And here's the twist. You try to fix this by doing more. You read books. You implement routines. You track behaviors. But each new technique is another word in a language your body has already stopped listening to. Because safety isn't something you command with rituals. It's something you build through consistency, through time, through belief. But you don't believe in sleep anymore. Not truly. You hope for it. You chase it. You resent it. But belief, the deep, body-level trust that sleep will come, is gone. And the body knows. How can you rest when the very signals you send no longer translate into anything the nervous system recognizes? You wake up and think the night healed you. That because you were unconscious for 7 hours, some kind of restoration occurred. But not all unconsciousness is sleep, and not all sleep is repair. The body can fake the ritual. It can close the eyes, slow the breath, enter partial cycles. You wake without memories of the night and assume something real happened. But when you spend the day fogged, short-tempered, forgetful, and aching, what do you call that? The body can simulate sleep without ever entering the depth where restoration happens. And you have adapted to this. You mistake absence for integration. You think being out is enough. But what if you were never truly under? Deep sleep, slow wave sleep, is a phase, not a feeling. It's not about perception. It's about what happens beneath perception. Synaptic pruning, metabolic clearing, hormonal regulation, memory encoding. And when you're chronically fragmented, when your cycles are disrupted, these processes do not complete. You keep waking up chemically unfinished. The emotional load from the day before is still in the system. The inflammation still circulates. The neurological scaffolding is frayed. And you convince yourself this is aging, or stress, or just how you are. But this is sleep in name only. It's a performance of healing without the substance of it. And what's worse, you adapt to this new baseline. You forget what clarity felt like, what energy felt like, what emotional regulation used to feel like. You shrink the definition of okay to fit what your system can barely maintain. You sleep enough to survive, not to restore. The body is clever. It doesn't collapse overnight. It maintains function through erosion, slowly, silently, until your symptoms, mood swings, weight gain, irritability, cognitive fog, become so normalized, you stop calling them symptoms at all. And you say, "I'm fine." But you're not fine. You're just operating inside a broken version of sleep. A system that still pretends to shut down at night, but no longer knows what to do once it gets there. What if you've been surviving on a counterfeit version of rest? So subtle, so convincing, you forgot what true recovery ever felt like. Your body is not a sanctuary. It is a machine designed for alertness, for movement, for response. Sleep is not its default. Sleep is its compromise. A vulnerability evolution permitted only because wakefulness was unsustainable. But nothing in your biology wants to be unconscious. Your body wants vigilance, movement, contact, heat, food, light. Sleep happens only when the drive to rest overcomes the drive to survive. And survival, in your world, never pauses. You are bombarded with stimulation, visual, auditory, emotional, alerts, deadlines, notifications, social performance, existential dread masquerading as productivity. You are hyper-connected and therefore constantly primed for action. Your body is in a state of near-permanent sympathetic dominance, the fight or flight state, which sleep cannot enter. And here's the contradiction. You are more sedentary than any generation before you. And yet, physiologically, you are in motion all the time. The heart, the lungs, the cortisol system, the attention centers, they are all braced. Braced not for sprinting, but for something more insidious: uncertainty. Your body never receives the signal that the world has stopped moving. So why would it shut down? Even when you lie still, the machine does not wind down. Stillness is not its cue. Safety is. And safety is absent. But worse than this, your machine was never designed to sleep in this context. The environment it evolved for was full of predictable rhythms: sun and dark, hunt and rest, exertion and calm. You've replaced that world with one that has no seasons, no silence, no edge. Everything blurs together. Sleep has become optional, inconvenient, interruptible. And so the body resists. It does not malfunction. It adapts. It prioritizes survival. It interprets wakefulness as readiness. And sleep, once a refuge, becomes a threat, because it means lowering your guard in a world that never lowers its weapons. You want sleep to happen in a context the machine was never built to process. And when it fails, you blame it. But the machine is doing exactly what it was built for, responding to the signals you've given it. What if your body isn't failing to sleep, but responding perfectly to a world that's forgotten how to rest? You treat the night as your own, a time of rest, withdrawal, healing, a protected interval between labor and labor. But the night does not belong to you. It never did. It belongs to everything you suppress. During the day, you are curated. Your posture is social. Your words are selected. Your reactions are filtered. But at night, there is no one to perform for. And so everything you disowned returns. Sleep does not arrive in a vacuum. It comes only after everything else has surfaced. Fear, fantasy, shame, regret, longing. You call them racing thoughts. But that's too kind. They are emotional audits running silently in the background. Some part of you, the part you tried to mute with caffeine and structure and productivity, comes back online in darkness. And you are not trained for this. No one taught you how to meet yourself at night. No one prepared you for what silence reveals. You were taught how to wake, how to work, how to speak, but not how to rest, not how to disappear, and certainly not how to face what returns when you do. So you delay it. You push the night further away. One more show, one more scroll, one more snack. This isn't laziness. It's resistance. Because some part of you knows when you finally stop pretending, you will be left alone with yourself. And the self, when unfiltered, is unbearable. This is why the bed becomes a place of torment. It holds not just your body, but your exile, the rejected child, the unspoken grief, the anger you swallowed, the truth you denied, the person you wanted to become, but never did. They all lie beside you, waiting, not to attack, but to be witnessed. And you, having no ritual for that, call it insomnia. But sleep is not stronger than avoidance. The nervous system protects you. If it senses that rest will trigger threat, emotional, psychological, existential, it holds back. It keeps you half awake, half guarded. You think you can will it into happening. You can't. Because the night is not a place. It's a threshold. And crossing it means being no one, doing nothing, letting go of every defense that has held your story together. What if sleep eludes you, not because you are broken, but because some part of you knows that peace would mean facing the self you've spent your life avoiding? Sleep is not memory's enemy. It is its editor. A process of pruning, organizing, deciding what to keep and what to let die. But you don't let anything go. Your mind holds everything. Every mistake, every humiliation, every detail of every near trauma you've ever half processed. You are drowning in information that was never meant to be kept. And your refusal to forget is what keeps you awake. In sleep, specifically slow wave and REM stages, the hippocampus and neocortex coordinate a complex transfer of memories. What matters is retained. What doesn't is erased. But your brain isn't allowed to do that anymore. Not when you're overfed on content and underfed on rest. You collect, but do not process. You read the news, watch the feeds, inhale tragedy after tragedy, and never metabolize it. You replay old conversations, not to understand them, but to relive the feeling of regret. You catalog your failures, archive your near misses, repeat future scenarios that never arrive. This isn't strategy. It's accumulated psychological debris. And debris doesn't sleep. Your mind is filled with open loops, unfinished processes that demand resolution. But there is no time for resolution, only more input. You go to bed stuffed with unreleased emotion, unexpressed thought, unshed grief. Sleep needs emptiness, but you offer it clutter. Your dreams, when they come, are chaotic, symbolic discharges of unfiled experience. If your sleep isn't deep enough, they don't complete. They just echo. You wake with the same thoughts you fell asleep with. There was no cleansing, only continuation. This is not your fault. You live in a culture that rewards memory as vigilance, that mistakes rumination for responsibility, that confuses internal torment with conscientiousness. But there is no peace in perpetual recollection, only paralysis. And so the brain resists sleep, because sleep means allowing something to fade, to vanish, and your mind doesn't believe that's safe. Forgetting feels like failure, like betrayal, like death. So you lie there, cycling the same thoughts night after night, hoping one more replay will deliver the clarity that never arrives. What if sleep will never come? Not because your body can't rest, but because your mind refuses to let go of a single thing it was meant to forget? You wake up and convince yourself the night was good enough. Maybe you stirred once or twice. Maybe you dreamed. Maybe you didn't. But you're up now, and that's what matters. You survived the night. The world didn't end, so you keep moving. But what you call mourning is not rebirth. It's continuation. You are not restored. You are resumed. The body wakes because it must. The hypothalamus triggers a hormonal shift. Cortisol rises. Body temperature lifts. Blood pressure surges. These are not gentle processes. They are mechanical, survival-driven. The mind follows because it is trained to, not because it is ready. And you lie to yourself. You drink caffeine, mistake the buzz for energy. You shower, and the temperature shift mimics invigoration. You enter routine, and the repetition provides just enough structure to mask fatigue. But fatigue is there, always there, woven into the edges of thought, lurking behind your delays, your dropped words, your emotional overreactions. You don't call it sleep deprivation. You call it not being a morning person. You call it mood. You call it age. But the truth is simpler, harsher. You are not rested. You have not been truly rested in years. And you normalize this. Everyone around you is just as wrecked, just as caffeine-bound, just as foggy. The collective delusion holds. If the entire culture is exhausted, then no one has to name it. No one has to admit that something essential has been lost. But the cracks show in your relationships, in your memory, in your inability to feel joy without stimulation, in your short fuse, in your forgetting why you walked into a room. These are not isolated flaws. These are symptoms of cognitive erosion. Because real sleep does more than reset. It renews. It remakes you. It carries emotional debris away. It clears amyloid from the brain. It binds memory into meaning. And when you miss it, even by a fraction, you don't just wake up tired. You wake up unfinished. And you live like that, incompletely rebooted, running a corrupted operating system, overcompensating with willpower, with stimulation, with shame. What if your entire waking life is just a performance of functionality, built on the silent catastrophe of sleep that never completed its work? There was a time when sleep was simply part of the cycle, not a project, not a diagnosis, not a crisis. You didn't have to earn it, or optimize it, or measure it. It was as involuntary as hunger, as basic as breath. Now it's a condition. You talk about sleep like an illness. I have insomnia. I'm a light sleeper. I can't sleep unless. It has become a category, a disorder, a field of treatment and failure. It's been medicalized, therapized, commodified, stripped of its mystery, and reduced to a system error. And maybe it is an error, but not yours. Sleep has become a symptom of culture, not biology, a casualty of modernity. You live in an environment fundamentally hostile to the organism you inhabit. Constant light, irregular rhythm, hyperstimulation, fear disguised as ambition. You were never meant to process this much, to respond this fast, to consume this widely, to compare this often. Your nervous system cannot adapt quickly enough, so it does what it can. It resists. It delays sleep. It fractures it. It signals that something is wrong. But instead of changing the system, you try to change yourself. You treat the symptom as failure. You track your sleep. You biohack it. You ingest substances to simulate what the body once did unassisted. You turn your bedroom into a laboratory. But the issue isn't inside your mattress. It's inside the logic of your days. Because the rhythm of sleep, its natural arrival and departure, is contingent on more than biology. It is built on a life that honors ebb and flow, not constant forward propulsion. And you do not live like that. You live like sleep is something to fit in, to squeeze between shifts, to earn after exhaustion. And then you wonder why it doesn't come, or why, when it does, it feels like failure. So you medicate the symptom. You blame the body, but you never ask the question that matters. What if insomnia isn't a disorder, but a signal that your entire life is running on a rhythm? The human organism was never built to survive? You want to sleep desperately. You fantasize about it during the day, like a lover you're always chasing and never catching. You read articles, you buy supplements, you create rituals, you say all the right things. But desire is not permission, and sleep is not granted by wishing harder. It is allowed only when the entire system, body, mind, memory, instinct, believes it is safe enough to vanish. But you do not vanish well. You do not go quietly, because you have internalized a deeper belief that rest must be earned, that exhaustion is weakness, that idleness is guilt, that your value is measured in output, and unconsciousness is the opposite of achievement. So when you finally lie down, a war begins, not of thoughts, but of narrative. Part of you says, rest. You need it. You deserve it. Another part says, not yet. Not until it's done. Not until you're fixed. Not until everything is resolved. And nothing is ever resolved. This is not psychology. This is internalized productivity culture, etched into the fabric of your nervous system. You no longer obey biology. You obey expectation. And the result? You never fully release. Even when horizontal, even when exhausted, a part of you stays tense, waiting for permission that never comes. You might drift, but you don't surrender. You might close your eyes, but the eyes inside your mind stay wide open. This is why you can't nap, why weekends don't help, why sleeping in makes you feel worse. Because sleep was never meant to be a reward. It was meant to be a baseline. And now, it's a battlefield. The war is invisible, but its scars are everywhere. Adrenal fatigue, anxiety, immune dysfunction, burnout. And you call it normal. You call it being busy. But what if it's just a sign that you've lost the ability to grant yourself the one thing your body has always known how to do? What if the reason you can't sleep isn't because you're broken, but because some deep part of you still believes you haven't earned the right to disappear. Silence used to mean safety. No predators, no alarms, no threat in the trees. But now, silence is a trap. You fear it. You run from it. You drown it with playlists, podcasts, white noise, anything that can hold back the tidal wave of what might rise if the world were finally quiet. But silence is not empty. It is filled with everything you avoid. When the noise stops, the self begins. And the self, unmasked and alone, is unbearable. This is not metaphor. The brain reacts to silence as stimulus. The default mode network, which governs self-referential thought, activates the moment external tasks stop. That voice in your head, it's not some quirky narrator. It's the sound of identity maintenance, of trying to hold the self together through inner monologue. You talk to yourself to stay coherent. But coherence is not peace. And when you remove the stimuli, when the distractions end, the internal voice doesn't go silent. It gets louder. It loops. It repeats. Because it has been silenced all day. And now it wants to speak. And what it says, you don't want to hear. You don't want to hear how tired you are, how much pain you've swallowed, how lonely you feel even in company. You don't want to revisit the memories that float up when there's no more content to cover them. You'd rather scroll until your eyes blur. You'd rather fall asleep to the sound of strangers. But sleep cannot enter a room that is still filled with unsaid truth. So the silence becomes unbearable. You pace, you snack, you turn the fan louder, you keep a light on, not because you fear darkness, but because you fear what silence holds. And here's the paradox. True sleep requires silence, physiologically, logically. You cannot enter deep sleep without sensory withdrawal. You cannot regenerate with half your nervous system still bracing against imagined noise. But the silence you've cultivated is not healing. It is haunted, and you have no ritual for clearing it, only avoidance. What if sleep is not broken, but simply waiting for you to enter a silence you no longer trust yourself to survive? You think your insomnia is yours, that it belongs to you, that it began with you. But your sleeplessness may not be a malfunction. It may be an inheritance, because trauma doesn't end when an event ends. It echoes across generations, through behavior, through hormone levels, through silence. Studies of epigenetics, the science of how environment alters gene expression, show that the descendants of trauma survivors often carry altered stress responses, cortisol dysregulation, heightened arousal, difficulty in down-regulating after perceived threat, even without experiencing the trauma themselves. So when you lie awake, heart racing for no reason, mind churning with unsourced fear, what exactly are you responding to? Maybe your body isn't reacting to this day, this deadline, this argument. Maybe it's reacting to a pattern handed down through blood, a nervous system trained by proximity to unspoken grief, displaced rage, ancestral fear that was never named, only felt. This isn't spiritual metaphor. It's biological recursion. The child of a war survivor may never hear a single story of the war, and yet still carry the war in their physiology, in their sleep patterns, in their capacity to feel safe in stillness. And how would you even know? You think of genetics as fate, but epigenetics is context. It is the nervous system whispering the unfinished business of those who came before you. It is the inability to rest, even in peace, because peace is unfamiliar. Sleep, for those born of fear, is not restoration. It is exposure. So you stay half awake, alert, braced. You call it personality. You call it overthinking. But it may be a system running an inherited algorithm, trying to solve a danger that no longer exists, but was never resolved. And you treat it like a problem with solutions. Melatonin, therapy, sleep hygiene. But how do you fix a signal that isn't broken, just misdirected across time? What if your sleeplessness is not just yours, but the echo of someone else's terror, still playing through the wiring of a body that never had the chance to unlearn it? You have done everything. The rituals, the avoidance, the supplements, the rewiring. You've read the research, downloaded the apps, created the perfect sleep environment. Still, the night resists you, because sleep is not earned through control. Sleep is the suspension of control, and you have spent your entire life avoiding that. You control your image, your output, your reactions, your relationships, your food, your work, your breath. You micromanage your thoughts. You curate your reality. But sleep does not respond to control. It requires trust. And you don't trust yourself to fall. So your body doesn't let go. Your nervous system doesn't yield. Because part of you believes, no, that the moment you stop monitoring everything, will break, will go wrong, the world will end, or worse, your mask will slip, and the person beneath it will surface, and you are not ready to meet them. Insomnia is the final rebellion of a body that no longer believes you know what's best for it. You keep asking, why can't I sleep? But that's not the real question. The real question is, what have you made of your life that sleep no longer fits inside it? Sleep does not live in systems of performance. It lives in surrender. It lives in the place you keep avoiding, the place where nothing is earned, and nothing is protected, and nothing is curated, only felt. You have spent years building a self that can survive the world. But sleep is not interested in survival. It is interested in disappearance, in surrendering identity, in trusting a body you've spent a lifetime doubting. And now the cracks are showing. What if sleep is not the thing being broken, but the thing revealing what already is? What if all your control, your vigilance, your effort is the very thing keeping the healing away? You wanted sleep, but sleep was never the goal. Sleep was only the mirror, and now you see it. The rituals, the resistance, the inherited terror, the surveillance of self, the loops that never close. This wasn't about sleep. This was about your life, the shape of your mind, the structure of your fear, the stories your body tells in silence when you stop interrupting. Sleep didn't abandon you. You abandoned the conditions under which sleep was ever possible. And now, in the darkness you once blamed, there is nothing left to hold responsible but you. Not as punishment, as revelation. Because to sleep, truly sleep, is to die. Just a little. To disappear. To trust. To surrender the self you've spent every waking hour constructing. And maybe, deep down, you knew that. Maybe that's why you've been awake for so long. So the question remains, now that you see it clearly, what are you still so afraid would happen if you finally, fully let yourself vanish?